Real part 3. That night, I had a dream. A young woman in a white kimono was kneeling beside my sleeping self. When I noticed her, she bowed deeply with her hands on the floor and then left the room. Before leaving the room, she bowed deeply once more. I wasn't sure if this dream was related to it. The next day, in the afternoon, I received a call from Not. He guided me over the phone, and I went out to meet them. Reman, his friend, and a man who looked to be in his late 30s arrived. He didn't seem like an ordinary person. He looked like a thug, and I couldn't imagine what kind of work he did. Because I hadn't explained properly, my parents were suspicious. The man, who was almost certainly using a fake name, introduced himself as Hayashi. I've heard about T's situation from him. It's quite a troublesome matter. Sorry for the confusion. T is me, and during the conversation, him refers to Mummer. So, Mr. Hayashi, what exactly is your relation to this matter? Well, this isn't something an amateur can handle. Sir, if I may, you might find this hard to believe, but if things continue like this, T is in danger. Your son's friend told me T is in danger and asked for my help, so I came. Is T in danger? You know, I've dealt with quite a few cases like this, but this is the worst I've seen. The room is filled with bad energy. Father, excuse me, but may I ask what your profession is, Mr. Hayashi? Oh, you're curious? Well, it's understandable. Suddenly coming here and talking like this does sound suspicious. But you see, we need to perform an exorcism and cleanse the area properly, or T will really be taken away. Can we ask for your help, Mr. Hayashi? Of course, if you leave it to me. These things need to be handled by a specialist like myself. But ma'am, there's some risk involved for me too, so I would need you to provide a small fee. You understand, right? How much are we talking about? Well, let's see. I would need at least 2 million yen. That's incredibly expensive. Even so, your son's friend asked me to come and help him, and I took the time to get here. If you don't want to, it's not my concern. But if 2 million yen can save T, it's a small price to pay, don't you think? Moreover, T went to a temple and was turned away, right? There are very few people who understand this kind of thing. Are you going to start looking all over again? I listened silently. When I heard 2 million yen, I looked at Nolan, who had an awkward expression. In the end, neither my father nor my mother could offer any better suggestions, given the unknown nature of the situation, so they reluctantly agreed to leave it to him. Hayashi immediately suggested performing the exorcism that night. He went out to make preparations, taking some money from my parents for the preparations before he left. When he returned in the evening, he set up candles, pasted papers that looked like talismans all over the room, placed a crystal ball near his knees, held a set of prayer beads, and poured what I assumed was psych into a cup. It started to look somewhat authentic. T, I'm going to perform the exorcism now. It'll be okay after this. Sir, ma'am, I'm sorry, but could you please leave the house for a while? There's a chance the spirit might go to you. Reluctantly, my parents waited in the car outside. As night fell and it got darker, the exorcism began. Hayashi chanted something that sounded like sutras, and at regular intervals, he dipped his fingers into the cup and flicked droplets at me. I lay down on the futon, closing my eyes, as Hayashi had instructed. A long time passed after the exorcism began. The chanting became increasingly fragmented. With my eyes closed, the only things I could perceive were the unpleasant atmosphere and the increasingly distorted chanting. At first, I didn't notice, but my neck hurt terribly. The itchiness had turned into a clear, sharp pain. Trying to endure the pain and not open my eyes, I clenched my teeth as the chanting stopped. But something was wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it, but the ending felt abrupt and incomplete, and there were no words from Hayashi. Most importantly, the pain in my neck did not subside. In fact, it was getting worse. I felt a chill, and it seemed as though something was straddling my futon. I knew I shouldn't open my eyes. I absolutely must not, but I did. When I opened my eyes, a terrifying sight greeted me. Hayashi was sitting to my right, performing the exorcism while I lay on the futon. When I opened my eyes, it was kneeling directly opposite Hayashi, with me in between. Its hands were on its knees, its upper body stretched forward, peering into Hayashi's face. There was only about a fist's distance between Hayashi's face and its face. It tilted its head curiously, moving its face in small owl-like motions, mumbling inaudibly as it peered at Hayashi. Thinking back, it might have been whispering something to him. Hayashi was looking slightly downward, his gaze fixed on the floor, not blinking, with drool dripping from his slack mouth. He seemed to be smiling a little. Occasionally, he would nod slightly. I stared in shock, forgetting to blink. Suddenly, it stopped moving its head. In the next moment, it turned its face toward me. I hurriedly shut my eyes tightly and pulled the futon over my head, chanting Namu Amida Butsu over and over again. The image of it moving its head like an owl right in front of my face haunted my mind. It was terrifying. I heard a rattling sound and the noise of someone running down the stairs. It seemed Hayashi had fled. I stayed under the futon, petrified with fear. When my parents came, turned on the light, and pulled the futon away, they found me curled up and rigid with fear. Hayashi, without even glancing at my parents, got into the car and drove off with his friend. Later, I heard from forward that Hayashi didn't say anything except drive. Far from solving the problem, things had only gotten worse. I no longer had the luxury of waiting 3 weeks for S-sensei. 4 more days had passed since I saw it again. Understandably, my neck had significantly healed, and although the marks remained, my physical strength had clearly returned. My fever had dropped, and my body was no longer an issue. However, that was only in a physical sense. I was still terrified, whether it was morning or night. I was constantly afraid that it would appear at any moment and any place. I had sleepless nights, barely ate, and was always on edge. In just 10 days, I think my face had changed significantly. I was mentally cornered and felt like I had no time left. Naturally, I couldn't live a normal social life, and my parents contacted my company to inform them that I was quitting. I only heard about this later. Apparently, they were quite nasty about it when my parents called. Everything scared me. Even the laundry or the persimmon tree swaying outside the window made me fear that it might be there. There were still more than 2 weeks left until S-sensei would come, and that felt like an eternity to me. Seeing this, my parents forcibly put me, trembling with fear, into the car and drove somewhere. My father repeatedly reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, and it's going to be okay." In the back seat, my mother held my shoulder and stroked my head. How many years had it been since my mother last stroked my head? At that time, I had no sense of time, and as we traveled in the car, night fell. It's embarrassing to admit this in my 20s, but with my mother's comforting presence, I finally fell into a deep sleep for the first time in a long while.